I have been known to make fun of Canada on more than a few occasions on this channel right here on theinternet.com, and the reason why I do so is because it's incredibly easy. The Canadians are known for being incredibly polite, but whenever they make international news, it's usually for really bad, very far left reasons. I mean, just look at their prime minister. He is one of the biggest jokes there is internationally. However, I can't really throw shade at the Canadians right now. I mean, I'm still going to. I'm still going to take my cheap shots against these maple syrup made of people. But the thing is, they're really stepping up. They have started a protest movement against the restrictions that we're seeing the world over, and it's having an impact. The establishment is shook, and that is why they're going after them so viciously. But more importantly, they're actually claiming victories because this protest method is so effective that despite media spears, people are getting more on board. Support is growing for it, and the Canadian government is a little bit worried. They're a little bit shook. Now, we are going to cover this in depth. You are going to learn so much about this country that you have no knowledge of because it's the northern neighbor of the United States and thus not very relevant to news in the United States. On the other side of this ad, I think it's for Virtual Shield, but honestly, I haven't decided. If you think technology today is bad for your online privacy, it's about to get a lot worse with this push towards virtual reality. As we progress closer and closer to VR, big tech is going to be able to monitor everything you see, you feel, and you do on the internet, even more so than they do right now. This is one of the reasons why I don't go online without using Virtual Shield. Virtual Shield can protect you from these sophisticated tracking mechanisms that big tech is using and developing further into the future. And it's pretty awesome. If you want that thing where you can go to another country virtually and go into Netflix or anything like that to get around region locks, they also got you on point with that. If you go to virtualshield.com/justice, you can get 50% off for your lifetime subscription. That's virtualshield.com/justice. Protect yourself in the real world and in the upcoming virtual world. So the Canadian Freedom Convoy is a movement started by truckers who had enough of the vaccine mandates and the restrictions imposed on them specifically, but on Canada overall. And to give you an idea of how insane the restrictions are, because if you live in the United States, you probably, even if you're living in one of the worst states, don't understand the level of restrictions that have gone on in that nation. There have been curfews, there have been government monitors that show up at your house when you arrive from travel to make sure you're in quarantine. There's been forced quarantine in hotels where you have to leave the doors open so that these government monitors can check on you, plus all of the vaccine passport information that people have had to deal with whenever they're going to restaurants or other types of events like movie theaters or similar. On top of that, recently, Quebecois, French Canada, has introduced or floated the idea of an extra tax on the unvaccinated because, you know, these people believe in your freedom of choice, and as Anna Kasparian likes to say, it's not a mandate. They're not forcing you to do it. They're just punishing you over and over again and repeatedly when you don't do it in order to compel you to comply. So obviously, there's nothing wrong with that. They're just doing it for your own safety. That's where Canada is.
Now, a group of Canadian truck drivers calling themselves the Freedom Convoy, tying up the streets of Ottawa.
Thousands flooded the streets over the weekend. The truckers are using their rigs to block streets and even the entrance to Parliament.
The demonstrations were initially aimed at pushback against vaccine mandates for truck drivers crossing the U.S.-Canada border. But the movement escalated into an expression of disapproval with the Canadian government's COVID-19 policies.
This convoy is all about freedom. It's not only with the truck drivers. It's actually for every single person. You, me, buddy down the road. It doesn't matter. It's all about your free choice.
You can't lock up healthy people and expect them to remain healthy. Okay? So the children have not been in school. I personally believe that is wrong. We need to drop the masks, drop the mandates, and start living our lives again.
And Canada's overreaching authoritarian government has created all sorts of other problems related to their nation, such as unemployment, supply chain shortages, and of course, this has led to the increase of prices that all Canadians have to deal with. But the truckers thing was the focal point. That was the flashpoint. That was the catalyzing event. And as we talked about in a previous video, the truckers have decided to get in a freedom convoy and drive through Canada and basically shut down the nation even further to tell them that they've had enough of the shutdowns. Now, I know this protest has been getting a lot of negative attention. I know they've been smeared by people like Justin Trudeau because these people are actually against the establishment. they're actually against the power structure, and unlike the riots of last year, they're not stealing flat screens TVs for civil liberties or whatever.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau blasted all the protesters earlier today.
Small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing do not represent the views of Canadians.
But despite the objective fact that this has not devolved into rioting, this has not been a violent protest, and there are very few instances of even problems being reported with this, the media has gone on a full court press against what's going on in Canada. And a perfect example of this is right here in the United States of America, Trevor Noah highlighting an alleged Nazi flag appearing along a Gadsden flag in the Great White North, because this goes to show you that if you have one Nazi flag present in your rally, that you're basically all Nazis and you should be never listened to, and we should just force the medicine into your body.
The swastika flag seen at protests denounced by 2 Conservative MPs who had openly supported the convoy.
People, let's admit it, once a Nazi flag shows up at a rally, the whole thing has just turned into a Nazi rally.
So right away, Trevor Noah and all the people who supported the race riots of 2020, violence that caused billions of dollars in damage in the United States, based on false premises and false allegations of police racism against black people, should be dismissed outright because they have nothing of value to say. They will excuse violence and the destruction of society. And again, this was at a period in time when the vaccine wasn't ready or widely available, so any of their concerns related to the virus are also completely invalid. They have no leg to stand on.
When the riots happened, that for me was an interesting culmination of everything. I saw so many people online saying, these riots are disgusting. This is not how a society should be run. You do not loot and you do not burn and you do not, this is not how our society is built. And a lot of people say, well, what good does this do? Yeah, but what good doesn't it do? That's the question people don't ask the other way around. What good does it do to loot Target? How does it help you to loot Target? Yeah, but how does it help you to not loot Target? Answer that question.
Number 2, and this is where we're going to get into a little bit of speculation, look at the combination of these 3 flags on your screen. You have the Gadsden flag, you have the Nazi flag, and you have the Canadian flag. The only people who see all of these things as one and the same are people on the far left. Those are the ones who think that libertarians, people who demand freedom from the government, the Canadian nation, and the Nazis are all the same party because they're all mostly white people, and white people are racist just like the Nazis. Wow, white racist Nazis are so bad and they're destroying the country. Right-wingers don't think like this. Right-wingers don't associate these flags. If this were Confederate flags, and by the way, there are a bunch of Confederate flags that are appearing across Canada, I could believe that. But the Nazi flag and the Gadsden flag, absolutely not, doesn't make sense. There is a very good chance that this is a left-winger, much like we saw against the Youngkin campaign, trying to hoax against the truckers because they want to support the left-wing agenda by giving the left-wing and the mainstream media something to attack that is not legitimate. Again, tell me the neo-Nazi that combos these flags. Tell me the libertarian that combos these flags. Tell me the conservative that combos these flags. Tell me what not wanting to have forced inoculations has to do with the Nazis. Nothing. It doesn't make any sense at all. So what are these people even talking about? Number 3, even if you say that this flag was brought out legitimately, what are the chances that it was legitimately in support of the Nazis and not comparing the Canadian government's current policies to the Nazis? Because that seems like a far more likely explanation, and considering the Canadian press and the mainstream media have gone after people for comparing Canadian government officials to communists and Nazis, it would seem like if this was legitimately brought out as not a way to get a photo taken so that they can be smeared, that would be the purpose of this flag being there, not because people are actually pledging support to the Nazis. Again, there are no Nazis. They were defeated in World War II by nations like the United States of America, and guess who joined us? The Canadians. It's something Canadians take pride in, just like it's something that Americans take pride in. So the fact that this photo, which is either obviously comparing the Canadian government to Nazis, not supporting the Nazis, or a direct hoax by left-wing activists like we've seen multiple different times before, aka the Youngkin campaign, one of the most recent and prominent examples, is getting all this attention, is a big red flag for me. And I don't mean the Canadian flag, and I don't mean the Nazi flag. I mean a giant red flag that we are being misled and they're trying to smear this movement, because there is this belief that if you smear the movement, then you can enact your authoritarian policies going forward, because those are bad people and you don't want to be associated with them. And credit where credit is due to the Canadians, because they're not buying this. They see the protests. Some of them are being annoyed by the horn honking and the traffic being blocked and all that stuff. And by the way, that's totally understandable. Even if you agree with these people, sometimes you want to get to work and actually drive places. I get that. But overall, people are seeing through the nonsense being portrayed by the media, and the polls are actually shifting. People are actually siding with these truckers, because despite whatever the media tries to say in the United States, abroad in Europe, or in Canada, in reality, these are working class people. I know the left loves to use that phrase, except when they come after them, protesting in a peaceful way against authoritarian restrictions. And it appears to be having an effect. Quebecois, as we talked about earlier, French Canada, is actually rolling back the plans to initiate attacks on the unvaccinated as a method to force these people, by the way, into complying with their will, due to the fact that, according to the premier of Quebecois, they don't want to divide the people any more than they actually are. Quote, "My role is to try to bring Quebecers, it's actually Quebecois, together to stay united. This is why we won't go ahead with the health contribution," he told reporters. "I understand that this divides Quebecois, and right now we need to be building bridges." Now, of course, these obvious concessions to the Freedom Convoy are being played up by the Canadian government as something that they were going to do anyway, and honestly, the trucker convoy likely is going to delay these restrictions being lifted, even though the announcement of these restrictions being lifted coincides with the protest, the mass resistance against such restrictions. And by the way, I just want to point out that Canada allowing 50% of people in restaurants and movie theaters and all that is still an overreach. It's still too much. But again, that's how ridiculous Canada was. That's why they were thinking about directly taxing people who didn't make the medical decision they wanted them to make, because they do not see any limits to their power. And again, this just goes to show you the power of the truckers, the power of people who work everyday jobs standing up to authoritarian government officials, and credit where credit is due, because their demands are on point. Not only do they want the restrictions lifted, but they want Justin Trudeau to resign. And I would actually say that Trudeau resigning is more important than the temporary restrictions being lifted, because they can always re-implement them later whenever there's a surge or whenever these truckers go home. That's why I would be saying, because you need to know that if you're in power and you're implementing these restrictions, you will be removed from power. We will force you out, because you do not belong at the helm of our government if you don't respect the freedoms of the individual. Governments should be instituted among men to secure liberty, not to do safetyism and basically control every aspect of our lives, not to direct all our medical decisions and tax people who don't comply with our will, not to insult people who are coming out against us, calling them racist, smearing them, and talking about how you're going to crack down and you're going to get them for all the bad things. And again, credit to the Canadian people, because apparently they try to get tow trucks out there to tow the trucks away. And what ended up happening was the tow truck operator said, look, we all got the virus, we can't make it. So they're sticking out on the reaction to the convoy, because people are getting in support with the convoy. And by the way, I said this multiple different times on this channel, I don't care about majority support. I think it's great that the support is going up for them, and in a lot of areas there is majority support, but that does not make something morally justified or not. A small irate minority can make big changes, can make waves, and even if this was only a minority, even if this was 10%, 30%, whatever, it doesn't matter, because morally they are in the right. If you don't push back against these restrictions, if you don't secure your liberty against the government, there's no limit to how far they will go. And if you guys want to learn more about the trucker convoy, the restrictions, and all the nonsense that's going on in Canada, I highly recommend that you guys subscribe to Lauren Chen's channel and watch some of her old videos about how bad it was in Canada. She has a bunch of crazy stories, and a bunch of them made it into her videos. One of the most insane things is that Canada, to prevent you from leaving the country, I think they mandate that you fly out because you can't drive out of the nation, but then you can't come back in by plane, you have to drive back in. Or if you try to come back in by plane, there's all these other onerous restrictions. So they did everything in their power to restrict the freedom of their citizens. And I think you should hear from a bunch of different Canadians on the issue, what they actually had to go through, especially if you're living in a state in the United States that barely has any restrictions at all. Anyway, that's all I really have for you guys today. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you like the video, you can show me by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content. Follow me on all my social medias. You can support me via the support links in the description box. This has been me talking about Canada's Freedom Convoy actually securing some victories, at least it seems, at the moment. Till next time.